So without further ado, we're going to move forward to the presentation of our upcoming report. So just to remind you, the title is Learning French as an Adult, a review of current best practices in adult French language training in Quebec. This project is the culmination of months of work spent interviewing practitioners who are working directly in the domain of adult French language training in Quebec. Much of this research was conducted by our policy researcher here at PERT, Simone Holt, and I'm going to hand over the presentation to her, and she can share more about the project, the report, and our findings. Over to you, Sim.
Hello, so my name is Simone Holt, a policy researcher here at PERT. Let me just share my screen and we can begin the presentation. Okay, can everyone see that as it's loading?
Yep.
Slowly. There we go. Great. Thank you. Alors, je vais faire un peu bilingue, si je peux. Le nom de ce rapport que je vous présente aujourd'hui, c'est Apprendre le français à l'âge adulte, l'examen des pratiques exemplaires et actuelles en francisation des adultes au Québec. So just to note, the slides for this presentation are in both French and English. I will alternate between the two. Veuillez noter que les diapositives de cette présentation sont en français et en anglais. J'alternerai entre les deux. They're written side by side, so you can follow along in either language. It is a little bit of an experiment to put PERT's ideals into practice of trying to include bilingualism when we can. Alors, l'objectif de la recherche, c'est de cerner les pratiques exemplaires et actuelles en matière de francisation aux adultes pour les intégrer au milieu du travail. So the project objectives of this project were to identify the best practices for French language learning for adults, particularly those who need to learn French to integrate into the labor market in Quebec. Our methodology is mainly a qualitative study. Nous avons mené 24 entrevues avec des professionnels qui possèdent une expérience et un savoir direct en lien avec l'écosystème de francisation québécois. Des enseignantes de français, des coordinatrices et conseillères pédagogiques, des spécialistes de l'acquisition linguistique, des approches pédagogiques connexes et des minorités linguistiques, qui sont associés avec des établissements d'enseignement postsecondaire, centres publics d'éducation des adultes et écoles de langue privées. Our findings were then validated by secondary sources of peer-reviewed literature and case studies on second language acquisition. And these studies are meant to provide further evidence beyond the qualitative data. Okay, what we wanted to know. Well, we queried for 3 primary areas: knowledge of Quebec's French language training ecosystem, the challenges and opportunities for programs, and identifying best practices in French language teaching and learning within the classroom by French language teachers. The answers were sorted thematically for best practices and innovative case studies. Une petite note on best practices. On ne s'appuie pas sur une définition précise de pratique exemplaire. Le concept est plutôt une combinaison de formation pédagogique, adaptation méthodologique et un processus d'essai-erreur. Nous mettons l'accent sur le point de vue des participants de la recherche, soulignant l'essence de l'innovation et leur dévouement envers les communautés servies. So when we speak to people involved in French language training and teaching, we really wanted to center their voices, their concerns as they respond to the needs of the communities that they serve. And we wanted to highlight that especially because they're frontline workers and doing much of this work within this environment that we are presenting to you. The findings were divided into 3 broad sections: pedagogical approaches, program design, and then program delivery. And we will give you examples of each of these main sections. Dans les approches pédagogiques, on a trouvé 4, on a souligné 4, on a trouvé plusieurs, mais par thème, on a souligné 4. Premièrement, le plurilinguisme, plurilingualism. That's a big word for Elmas. Cette approche vise à s'appuyer sur la culture et compétences linguistiques de la personne apprenante pour favoriser l'apprentissage linguistique. The idea is that in multicultural societies, such as Montreal, and increasingly across Quebec as immigration numbers continue, is that you treat the knowledge base, the diverse linguistic knowledge base of your students as knowledge to build upon, that you consider what they already know as something, as a resource for you as the teacher. It is important to note also that many of our French language teachers were using these kinds of approaches without even necessarily knowing that there was a distinct pedagogical theory approach. They were simply adapting to an increasingly diverse student base. The second best practice we want to highlight is cultural exchange, introducing Quebecois media and culture, which encourages intercultural exchanges of ideas and traditions. The idea was that teachers would be showing TV and film and different types of popular media, and that their student base were often sharing from their own experiences and encouraged to relate to the content, because language is culture. So it becomes a pedagogical practice to build cultural bridges in this way. Le renforcement de la confiance en soi, aider les élèves à participer aux discussions en classe, à s'intéresser aux leçons et à ressentir moins d'anxiété en lien avec leur apprentissage. This was a big one that French language teachers highlighted over and over again, that even with a student base who was willing and had knew French or knew some French, that the anxiety of speaking French in public was a barrier to learning, and that whatever they could do to diminish this barrier was part of their pedagogical approaches. So that would include going for activities and guided activities, going to the grocery store, going bowling, doing things in a low stakes environment that would encourage their confidence to then use the skills that they gained on their own. And finally, the idea of lifelong learning, that language acquisition happens at all stages of life. Sorry, is this, let me just double check the, there we go. Okay. Just rebooting it, myself, my apologies. Bon. Okay, lifelong learning. Language acquisition happens at all stages of life in many different contexts. So you can take a class for 6 months, but that is not enough to become fluent in the language, because it takes practice, and it takes practice to apply the language in different contexts, whether that's social or professional or other means. And so that a pedagogical approach that understands that language learning and language acquisition happens over a lifetime in various phases has a better chance of success. Maintenant, je vais changer un peu dans conception des programmes and what it would mean to have a program design that is a best practice that allows for more successful programs. Un milieu d'apprentissage souple, des cours virtuels, hybrides et en présentiel permettent d'accueillir davantage d'apprenants et d'apprenantes. The idea for flexible learning environments is that adult learners have children, are caregivers, have jobs, and that they require a program design that accommodates their varied lifestyles to lower the barriers and make it easier to access these courses. The use of technology. Computer software and mobile applications designed for language acquisition and teaching can be integrated into the classroom and used for self-learning. With the advances in technology, this has such a high potential. But the use of technology can expand to investing in digital infrastructure. This is particularly important for the rural areas of Quebec, where digital literacy is low and access to reliable internet is also low. So that we are conceiving of this recommendation as a far broader than just programs and software, but also an idea of a technology broadly understood that the government could invest in for all of Quebec residents. Et finalement, des programmes intégrés au milieu du travail. Les apprenants et les apprenantes vivent une francisation immersive tout en acquérant une expérience de travail, que ce soit dans leur emploi actuel, lors d'un stage ou dans le cadre d'une activité bénévole ou de mentorat. This is also a big one. The idea would be that when you are doing a work-integrated language learning program, that you are then not limited to already having achieved a high level of fluency before you enter the labor market in Quebec, that you would have had a certain level, but that it doesn't have to be at fluency, that incorporated into your work life and incorporated into the skills that you learn on the job includes language learning. Because anytime you take a new job, you are also learning on the job. So that our recommendation would be to have programs that include language within this skill acquisition. Maintenant, je vais changer un peu juste pour souligner. Oups, attends. Bon. Maintenant, pour des exécutions des programmes, the program delivery. Now, a big one was supporting teaching personnel, that a lack of resources, burnout, and overwork among both teachers and administrators is quite prevalent. This is especially true in the public sector. So adequate support is needed, including specific training to teach adults. Adult learners are different than child learners. Children tend to learn by immersion, but adults tend to learn best when they generate new knowledge based on pre-existing knowledge. So build upon what they already know in their personal life, in their social life, in their professional life, and use that knowledge to then create bridges to generating knowledge in French. So it requires a particular type of training to teach adults that is different than the training to teach children or the youth sector. Dans l'exécution des programmes, mettre des limites de la taille des classes. Ça permet au personnel enseignant de suivre de près le progrès et le développement personnel des personnes apprenantes. Cela encourage la participation aux activités en classe aussi. Quand les professeurs peuvent suivre leurs élèves, ils peuvent faire des adaptations au fur et à mesure. Nos professeurs nous dit que des classes de 4 à 6 personnes, surtout pour ceux qui viennent juste de commencer, c'est idéal. Et après ça, quand tu deviens un peu plus avancé, on peut élargir les classes, le nombre d'élèves dans les cours. Mais au début, vraiment, une attention, c'est mieux pour les élèves, une attention spécifique et guidée. And finally, lower user costs. Some language learners pay high fees for customized curriculums, and these are usually done in private, which is a barrier to many. So expanding the affordability is important, particularly for programs geared towards labor market integration. So in private language schools, there are certain businesses that may hire private language schools to develop a curriculum of French learning based on a particular job. If they were hiring a collection of software engineers, then they would design a course for that. But that is within the private sector. So what we envision ideally is that some of these resources are far more accessible to the public sector with low barriers, because the idea is that the courses should be as accessible as possible to the most amount of Quebec residents. Dans cette section, je veux souligner des programmes pilotes et études de cas de francisation. So in this section, I want to highlight some innovative pilot programs and case studies for French language learning. Premièrement, goodness, okay, first of all, we have Francisation du non-sautant. So this was a program launched in 2016. The goal was to train Montérégie workers in French during the off-season, but then, permit them to have a job offer at the end. It was offered to workers with beginner and intermediate French proficiency in French to learn and improve language skills on the job. It was created to address the labor shortage. And as you can see, that could be quite relevant to even to today, X amount of years later, as a multi-level cooperation between government and community and professional organizations. There were 3 government organizations that funded it, but it required a community effort, different types of professional associations, in addition to teachers. So this multi-level cooperation is something that we see again and again as something that could be very effective, because language learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in society. If we want to increase the amount of French speakers, then it has to have multi-level cooperation. So this is a good example of that. Un autre programme, c'est Dialogue FR, c'est pour apprendre le français dans son commerce. We are fortunate today to have a person whose this program was their creative initiative, and we will speak to them later on during the panel. Alors, it's a mobile application. C'est utilitaire, gratuit, flexible et pratique. Qui est offert aux employés d'un commerce. Vous avez une banque d'heures définie selon le niveau d'employé, des courants de 15 minutes à 1 heure selon les horaires et les besoins des entreprises, une formatrice disponible pour se rendre directement sur le lieu de travail des employés, et un guide oral en français pour recevoir et informer sa clientèle. Alors, vous voyez que c'est la flexibilité autour de qu'est-ce qu'ils ont besoin les employés et les employeurs, to make it as easy as possible. And finally, we wanted to highlight this from UQAM, the Intercultural Twinnings program. The objective of the program was to raise awareness of cultural diversity, encourage immigrants to practice French, and develop linguistic competencies related to newcomers' professional fields. The program started at Université de Québec à Montréal in the early 2000s. It pairs a French language learner with a volunteer Francophone mentor. And this pairing is then supervised by a teacher, and they develop project and activities together. So it develops cross-cultural empathy. It helps people feel more open to another culture. It sensitizes the dominant culture to these struggles of learning a new language as an adult. It has multiple benefits, and it is now a program that has inspired other countries and other areas to develop their own types of intercultural twinning programs, and we see it relatively internationally. So far, they claim over 12,000 pairings, but that doesn't necessarily count even some of the international efforts or some of the more informal efforts, because even in our research, we found that even if the model of the program that was developed by UQAM wasn't applied, that some types of mentoring and pairing was part of informal learning for different community groups and different immigrant newcomer centers. So that because this type of pairing allows not just learning as passive, it's about exchange and developing relationships as a human endeavor, as human interaction. So that's the end of the presentation to summarize the findings. And now I will pass it back over to Sandazile. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sim. Thanks for sharing that. So as I mentioned before, we're looking forward to releasing this report next week. So you'll have a moment, everyone on this webinar, to look at the report and share your perspectives with us as well. So we look forward to your feedback. So I'm now going to move forward to the panel discussion of our conversation. I'd like to bring in our experts. So today we have 2 experts. We have Andrienne Gendron-Landry and we have Tino Bordano. So first I'll start with Andrienne Gendron-Landry. She holds a master's degree in second language didactics and is currently a pedagogical advisor at the Cégep du Vieux-Montréal in the Language Center and in project development. She has extensive knowledge of several French as a second language reference programs, including the Canadian Language Benchmark, the Échelle québécoise de niveau des compétences en français, which is at MIFI, and the CEFR. Ms. Gendron-Landry has participated in the development of several French as a second language materials, as well as in the design of courses for professional purposes. She specializes in innovative and meaningful online courses and the development of interactive pedagogical applications and improving course offerings in businesses. So obviously you can all see that she's very well qualified to speak to this topic. We also have Mr. Tino Bordonaro. So Mr. Tino Bordonaro is the chairperson of the Advisory Board on English Education, also known as ABEE, at the Ministère de l'Éducation du Québec. He has also been teaching courses on educational policy, classroom pedagogy, and school administration at McGill University since 1991. From 2010 to 2019, he was responsible for the social sciences programs at the English Montreal School Board. Born in Montreal, Mr. Bordonaro completed his undergraduate studies at Bishop's University and holds an MA from McGill University. He's also fluent in 3 languages, so he has real life experience with language learning and enjoys reading and traveling whenever possible. Thank you both for joining us. We're so excited to have you. So I have prepared several questions for you, just to kind of hear your perspectives on the report, but also more broadly on this topic. So I'll start with you, Tino. You have experience and knowledge of the English language post-secondary and vocational education system here in Quebec. That's part of your background. So could you speak more to the importance of learning French as a second language, specifically within that context of post-secondary education and vocational education, and what that looks like?
Yes, certainly. And thank you for inviting me onto this panel. I will try to keep my response to under 4 minutes as instructed. So I'll begin by saying that French language training is very important in adult and vocational education. It's important in all areas, but as well, adult and vocational education, especially in Quebec's English sector, for several reasons. These reasons are legal, they're economic, social, practical, political, and of course, linguistic. Legally, Quebec is officially a French-speaking province. The Chart of the French Language, or Bill 101, as modified by Bill 96, establishes French as the official language. And the law requires that all students, including those in the English sector, have sufficient knowledge of the French language so that they may integrate into Quebec society as well as the job market. This has an economic impact on employment opportunities. French is the primary language of communication in many places of work in Quebec. Proficiency in French, in the French language, increases employment opportunities and the potential for career advancement. Socially, the French language skills are also a requirement to integrate into Quebec society. Learning French enables students in the English sector to connect with the majority that speaks French. This results in more participation in social activities and more engagement with the local community, facilitates cultural integration, fosters cross-cultural understanding, and promotes a sense of belonging in this province. There are, of course, practical reasons for learning French. Many vocational programs in this province require practical training, such as an apprenticeship. This requires that students in these programs interact with coworkers, superiors, customers, etc., in the French language. Proficiency in this language ensures effective communication. In these settings, it will enhance the quality of work and again promote integration and collaboration. Learning French also promotes bilingualism, being competent in both languages. Of course, French and English provides workers with a competitive advantage in Quebec's job market and beyond. It is also beneficial if adult students have access to schooling and training in French. Quebec offers a wide range of adult and vocational training in the French school boards, now service centers. By attending these programs in these service centers, members of the English community have access to many more adult and vocational programs, providing even greater opportunity in Quebec and again, beyond. Politically, proficiency in the French language among the members of the English community increases our ability to engage in the political process, participate in political discourse, and advocate for language rights, including English language rights. And lastly, but perhaps most importantly nonetheless, French second language training plays an important role in preserving the vitality of the English-speaking community in the province of Quebec, especially in the rural and remote regions. French language training increases the opportunity of the members of the English communities, thus discouraging their departure from these communities and from Quebec altogether. Now, furthermore, preserving the vitality of the English language in Quebec is necessary for upholding English minority linguistic rights. Not only are these rights recognized in Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but by preserving the vitality of the of Quebec's English communities, Quebec reinforces its commitment to inclusivity, diversity, and the protection of minority language rights. Given the importance of adult French language training, because of the importance of adult French language training, in its brief, and that is a brief by the Advisory Board on English Education, in June of 2016, the Advisory Board submitted the following 6 recommendations to the then Minister of Education. 1, there should be a thorough review of Quebec's adult and vocational training programs. 2, these adult and vocational training programs should include French language training. 3, appropriate resources for second language courses should be readily available. 4, more support for students with special needs and adult and vocational education should be provided. 5, career counseling should emphasize the importance of learning French. And 6, school boards should cooperate with Emploi Québec and other government agencies to make the link between education and employment. The Advisory Board believes that English adult and vocational education centers offer some of the best of both worlds. They offer training in English, which is an industry standard in many parts of the world, and French second language training, thus allowing graduates of these programs to work and live in Quebec. That is all that I have, I believe. Hold on, I'm going to check my talking points one last time. Yes, that's it. Thank you, and I hope I kept it under 4 minutes.
Thank you so much for respecting the time, Tino. Excellent practice as a panelist. And there was a lot of information there, so I think a lot of people would be interested in also seeing those recommendations from the Advisory Board. If there's a link to those, we can try and share those out after.
I could post or send you a link to the Advisory Board site.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Very easy to do. I'll see if I can put it in the chat momentarily.
Great, thank you. Andrienne, I'll give you a chance to respond if there's anything you just want to speak to around French language training, post-secondary, and voc-ed for adults, and that's who are, I guess, pursuing a degree at the same time.
Premièrement, merci beaucoup de m'avoir invité. C'est un plaisir d'être avec vous ce midi. Je suis totalement en accord avec ce que M. Bordonaro a dit. J'ajouterais même que je mettrais encore plus d'emphase sur la manière dont on construit les cours pour les adultes. Parce qu'on n'est pas au niveau de l'enseignement primaire et secondaire, comme l'a dit bien entendu Mme Holt tout à l'heure et même M. Bordonaro. On est rendu à quelque chose d'autre. On est avec des personnes qui ont déjà une vie, qui des fois allient le travail, les enfants, des fois plusieurs types de travail. Il faut être en mesure de bien construire les cours qui vont être offerts justement en français langue seconde. Tout comme anglais langue seconde ou n'importe quelle autre langue pour les adultes, puis s'assurer justement de son efficacité, puis bien entendu rendre ça le plus souple possible.
Oui, je pense que c'est bon ça l'efficacité. And I think, Andrienne, your specialty, especially with the design of the courses, I think is a key aspect, right, of making sure that those courses are easy for people to do, right? As people who are busy and they're studying or they're working at the same time. So I do have a question for you, Andrienne, spécifiquement pour toi. So dans ce report, nous avons beaucoup parlé de l'utilisation de la technologie et de son potentiel sur l'apprentissage de la langue française. Que penses-tu de cette approche et comment ces innovations peuvent-elles être mises en œuvre plus largement tout en restant accessibles?
C'est une grande question. C'est une question quand même assez large. Je pense que quand on utilise les technologies, il ne faut pas les surestimer, il ne faut pas les sous-estimer non plus. Donc, il faut avoir une espèce de balance entre les deux parce que il faut s'en faire un allié. Il faut prendre en sorte les technologies et pas tout donner aux technologies, mais garder une espèce de balance entre l'éducation qui est faite en présence auprès des apprenants, puis aussi comment on va utiliser la technologie. Hem, Parce qu'on a toujours besoin d'allier les 2. Donc, on a besoin d'avoir de l'input, de manière, humaine, puis on peut pratiquer très bien avec la technologie, mais est-ce que la technologie va être capable de nous apprendre tout ce que l'humain est capable de nous apprendre? Je reste un petit peu je reste un petit peu dubitative par rapport à ça. Hem, pour rendre accessible, en fait, si on parle de technologie en général, bon, les technologies sont accessibles. OK, on peut aller sur une application, Duolingo ou même Dialoguer-Faire, celle qu'on a, que j'ai développée en collaboration avec la SDCM. Mais il reste qu'il y a une partie qui est intangible, qui est l'interaction avec l'autre. Puis, dans les milieux de travail, c'est ça qu'on va avoir, c'est l'interaction avec l'autre. Donc, si on interagit seulement avec un écran, que c'est autoportant, que les cours sont autoportants, où est l'interaction avec l'autre? L'autre chose aussi, l'accessibilité dépend beaucoup, donc de rendre le produit accessible, donc peu coûteux, dépend beaucoup des subventions qu'on peut avoir. Donc, vient à se demander, qui doit nous aider à travers tout ça? Le gouvernement, des fondations, les entreprises privées, donc je pense qu'il y a quand même, il y a quand même plusieurs acteurs qui pourraient influencer l'accessibilité. Donc, qui dit accessible dit subvention, subvention qu'il faut dégager pour avoir des ressources humaines qu'on doit utiliser et payer éventuellement. Donc, j'espère que j'ai répondu à la question.
Oui, oui, merci. Tino, I'll give you a chance to respond. Just your thoughts on that relationship between French language training for adults and using technology to facilitate that.
I do agree. I do agree with Andréane Gendron-Landry that second language learning is an interactive process, that it has to be accessible, and that technology has an important role to play. Evidently, technology does play an important role. Online language learning apps can offer on-site, at-work, interactive lessons, including vocabulary lessons, grammar drills, pronunciation practice, all important components of learning that I trust Andréane Gendron-Landry is more than familiar with. In addition, there are virtual tutoring systems. These services can connect learners with speakers through video conferencing platforms, a little bit like we are doing now. These platforms can provide work-specific instruction that can help learners improve their language skills in a context that is work-specific. These platforms also facilitate language practice through video calls, chat sessions, allowing learners to practice their target language with a fluent speaker while helping them acquire work-specific skills. Technology provides access to a vast range of multimedia resources. These include podcasts, again, videos, audiobooks, language learning websites. Or rather, a good model, albeit probably overly simplified, is the plethora of how-to videos on YouTube. I mean, again, it's an overly simplified model, but one nonetheless. These resources expose learners to real world, authentic, in context, again, specific industry terminology, I'll mention a few others. Virtual reality, augmented reality. These technologies create immersive language learning experiences by simulating not just the language, but simulating the workplace as well. So they can really be in situ techniques or ways to learn a second language. They're interactive, they're engaging, and they allow the learner to practice language skills again in a realistic context. Overall, technology can provide a wide range of resources, interactive platforms, immersive experiences that support learning at work. By leveraging these tools, employees can develop their language skills and improve their communication abilities, ultimately contributing to their professional growth and career opportunities.
Great, thank you for that. So just, I'm gonna ask one more question for both of you, and just a reminder for the audience, you can add questions to the Q&A and we'll go through those shortly. So I'll start with you, Tino. Just so based on your experience as chair of the Advisory Board on English Education and working with the Ministère de l'Éducation du Québec, what role does government play in helping to actually implement these types of practices? And just more broadly, what other stakeholders should be considered if we're talking about seriously implementing these types of practices?
Okay. Given the size and influence, I should say authority, but influence as well, given the size and influence of the Quebec government, it inevitably plays an important role in implementing programs and influencing best practices, including those in second language learning. First, and perhaps most obviously, the government establishes the curriculum in this province. It sets the learning objective, it sets the standards and guidelines that shape the content and structure of language programs, including, of course, second language programs. Therefore, the government should incorporate research-based and best practices into the development of this province's curriculum, thus ensuring that learners receive a high-quality second language education. The government also sets the standard for training and professional development of the language teachers, the second language teachers, well, first and second, but we're focusing on the second language teachers. This includes equipping teachers with the necessary knowledge and skills to effectively teach a second language. It includes best practices in language instruction, assessment, techniques, and of course, instructional technology. And by investing in teacher development, the government improves the overall quality of second language education. The government allocates resources such as funding and materials to support second language learning. This includes the approval of textbooks and other instructional material, as well as increasingly technological resources that facilitate second language acquisition. Again, by ensuring adequate resources are available, the government promotes effective second language teaching and learning. Once again, the government establishes policies and regulations, including those for second language instruction, as well as in schools, adult and vocational education centers. Therefore, the government should promote evidence-based policies to ensure consistent and high-quality language learning programs in our schools. In other words, government should support research-based initiatives to ensure that effective second language learning strategies and methodologies are applied. This is only possible by funding research and innovation in second language education and will result in the development and dissemination of best practices. The government also has a responsibility to ensure equitable access to second language learning opportunities. This includes providing language instruction to diverse populations, such as immigrant communities, individuals with disabilities, marginalized groups, and so on. By promoting this kind of inclusivity and equal access, the government enables more individuals to effectively acquire a second language. Lastly, but always equally importantly, the government should collaborate with various stakeholders in the development and implementation of second language programs. The adult learners themselves are the primary stakeholders. Therefore, their needs, motivations, and learning styles should be taken into account when designing language learning programs and methodologies. Second language teachers are instrumental as well. They contribute to designing and implementing effective instructional strategies, providing feedback, and creating a supportive learning environment. Schools, adult and vocational education centers have a significant impact on second language learning. They allocate resources, provide infrastructure, and foster an environment conducive to language learning. Second language researchers contribute significantly to conducting studies, developing theories, and identifying effective pedagogical methods. Their findings inform and improve language learning practices. The government, you cannot deny the role of the government for reasons that have been mentioned. The government and policymakers shape language learning programs throughout this province. They do so through policy decisions, funding allocations, the establishment of guidelines, as well as standards, etc. Governments promote the integration of second language learning into the education system and provide resources for professional development. We cannot deny the important role of industries and businesses because they have a stake in second language learning, especially in Quebec. They collaborate with schools, adult and vocational education centers to ensure that language programs align with workplace skills and the needs the needs of the job market. Community organizations. Community organizations can support second language learning initiatives by offering, once again, resources, organizing cultural events, and promoting language opportunities outside of the school or adult education centers' formal settings. One cannot deny the importance of technology. It plays an increasingly important role in language learning. Therefore, developers of language learning software, online platforms, educational apps, etc., can contribute importantly by creating innovative tools that facilitate second language acquisition and practice. All this to say, in short, all stakeholders can leverage their expertise as well as experience, not to mention resources, and improve second language learning among adults. That's all I got.
Thank you. Thank you, Tino. Andrienne, avez-vous une réponse pour ça? Juste si vous avez un commentaire pour le rôle du gouvernement.
Quelle belle réponse, Monsieur Tino. C'était quand même assez élaboré. De mon côté, je dirais à dire que les parties prenantes, oui, le gouvernement, effectivement, mais le gouvernement, tu as le ministère de l'Éducation d'un côté, tu as le ministère de l'Éducation supérieure, tu as le ministère de l'Immigration, de la francisation et de l'intégration. Donc, on est avec 3 ministères et là, j'ai pas rajouté celui-là d'Emploi Québec non plus. J'ai pas rajouté celui-là non plus qui est Emploi et solidarité sociale. Donc, ça fait beaucoup de ministères. Puis, Dieu sait que tous ces ministères-là, des fois se parlent, mais des fois se parlent pas. Donc, entre autres choses, c'est que oui, tous les parties prenantes, mais établir des liens entre tout ça. Et qui va être capable de faire établir tous ces liens-là entre les différents ministères? Bien, c'est les organismes d'employabilité, anglais ou français. Ce sont aussi les institutions, les milieux d'enseignement secondaires, postsecondaires, autant anglophones que francophones. Puis, c'est aussi de mettre dans cette boucle-là les chambres de commerce, les entreprises, et de dire, bon, écoutez, voici nos besoins au ministère, avec un S. Voici les besoins dont nous avons besoin. Et au lieu que ça soit du top-bottom, que ça parte de la base pour monter jusqu'au gouvernement. Je sais que c'est un petit peu utopique, mais en même temps, je crois réellement que si on est capable de démontrer la nécessité d'avoir que nous, en tant que base, on est concertés et on se concerte, ça va être plus facile d'établir des passerelles entre les différents ministères. Puis je pense que c'est ça qui manque. C'est les passerelles entre les différents ministères pour que tout le monde puisse justement avoir leur juste sur quel type de curriculum avons-nous besoin, quel type d'application avons-nous besoin ici au Québec pour aider justement les gens à apprendre une langue seconde, que ce soit l'anglais ou le français. Ici, c'est le français qui nous intéresse, mais je pense que il faut aussi, plus on met plus on rajoute à la demande, plus on rajoute des nouvelles, des nouveautés, plus on dilue l'offre, plus ça commence à devenir, je dirais, difficile à suivre. Et plus l'offre n'est pas nécessairement de qualité. Parce qu'il ne faut pas oublier une chose, oui, former nos professeurs, mais formons-les correctement pour, euh, pour, pour qu'ils soient en mesure de répondre à ce qu'on a besoin sur le marché. C'était ma réponse.
Merci beaucoup, Andrienne. On va déménager dans le question and answer because I do want to give everyone else an opportunity to speak with the panelists. So we have one question here. Someone is asking, what would be your recommendations for private second language adult education centers? So this is the private sector who are specializing in business language classes. How can we make sure that we keep our course offers accessible, yet we can integrate all of the best practices that were mentioned today, including training instructors on the specificities of adult learners? So I don't know, Andrienne, if you want to start us off just on maybe plugging a little bit about the work you've done working with the private sector?
Si la première chose que je ferais, ça serait vraiment de partir avec les besoins, OK, les besoins des entreprises. OK, présentement, je travaille avec plusieurs entreprises, puis je vais voir les employés, je leur demande, je vais voir les employeurs aussi, puis je leur demande de quoi avez-vous vraiment besoin? Est-ce que vous avez besoin qu'ils fassent un chit-chat dans la cuisine? Vous avez besoin qu'ils soient capables de faire une réunion? Donc, c'est vraiment aller le plus rapidement possible sur la langue de travail. Il y a beaucoup de choses qui s'est faites depuis les dernières années avec l'Office québécois de la langue française. Pas juste l'Office québécois de la langue française, mais il y a quand même Ternium Plus aussi qui arrive avec vraiment du vocabulaire très, très, très spécifique, juste pour nommer ceux-là. Mais je pense que plus on va directement là où l'adulte veut aller, okay, parce que l'objectif numéro 1, c'est de parler, c'est de communiquer. L'objectif numéro 1 pour un adulte, c'est de se faire comprendre, puis surtout dans un milieu de travail. Donc, plus la communication va se faire rapidement, mieux ça va être. Juste d'arriver, puis de parler, de se concerter, employés, employeurs ensemble et diminuer les coûts. Diminuer les coûts. Même si on ne fait pas des profits de 56 OK? Juste de diminuer et de dire, bon, ben, au lieu d'avoir un profit de 56, je vais en avoir un de 20, ça fait toute la différence. Puis ça fait la différence auprès des employeurs aussi parce que avec Francisation Québec, vous allez avoir des cours de base okay, dans certains secteurs, mais ça ne va pas aller plus loin okay, qu'un certain niveau linguistique. Donc, l'objectif, ce serait peut-être d'aller plus loin que ça, okay, d'aller vraiment chercher dans des aspects très, très, très spécifiques du milieu de travail.
Thank you, Andrienne. Tino, did you have a quick response to that?
Yes. I'll start by saying that the private sector has much to give and much to gain from second language learning. Once again, they provide the industry standards, the language skills that are required in context. That's what they have to give. And of course, what they have to gain is a more bilingual and therefore proficient and likely effective workforce. Therefore, collaboration between the private sector and adult vocational education schools or the education sector is advantageous. Also, studies have shown that public-private partnerships, sometimes referred simply as the triple Ps, public-private partnerships are effective and advantageous, provided that their purpose, their objective is well defined, and all parts of the partnership, all members of the partnership are given equal worth, equal value, and equal opportunity to contribute.
Great, thank you for that. So we'll move on to the next question. So this one is about the regions. So someone said, could you please tell us more about how to implement these practices in the regions and what can be done to adapt French language courses to rural conditions? And they asked you to especially talk about the use of technology as one of those factors. I don't know which one of you wants to jump in, maybe Andrienne, Tino. La politesse.
I can go first. The advisory board has looked at the vitality of the English language in the regions, and one factor that is increasingly important is instruction in general and second language instruction in particular. The regions are isolated, and the English communities in the regions are even more isolated. They don't have the critical mass in order to provide many programs, and therefore rely heavily on technology to access these programs. The biggest problem in the regions is access to services, access to programs, and this access is facilitated through technological means. It allows somebody who lives in a rural or remote part of Quebec to have access to not just information, but possibly as much as possible, and I'll qualify that briefly, but access to programs, instruction, training. Where the problems arise is when these learners need to participate in an apprenticeship or an on-site or a program that requires on-site training. That's still a challenge. Technology has the opportunity to address this challenge. I'm talking about possibly virtual realities and such like technologies. In my opinion, they haven't been fully developed yet, but the opportunity is there and could address the most mitigating problem in the regions, and that is not just access to second language instruction, but access to on-site learning that is important in adult and vocational education programs.
Andrienne, did you have a response to that question as well?
Pour le moment, je pense que, comme le disait Tino, ça reste un petit peu difficile d'aller dans les régions, mais il y a toujours la technologie. Moi, je commencerais avec quelque chose de très simple, qui est les cours en ligne. Allons-y, les cours en ligne, les cours hybrides. Mais il n'y a pas juste ça aussi. Peut-être aller voir les sociétés de développement commercial, de votre région, et d'essayer de faire un partenariat avec eux, pour justement élaborer des mentorats que vous pouvez faire à l'intérieur, justement, des restaurants, excusez-moi, des restaurants, des entreprises. Donc, si on fait un petit peu de mentorat mélangé avec des cours en ligne qui sont plus structurels, mélangé avec un petit peu justement d'applications pédagogiques en lien justement avec vos réalités de la région, je pense que ça peut mener à des résultats intéressants, puis surtout à donner confiance. Parce que là où le bas blesse, c'est la confiance des apprenants. Donc, si vous êtes capable de mettre sur pied un projet spécifique, puis vous savez que le ministère de l'Immigration va donner beaucoup d'argent pour les projets spécifiques, justement, en francisation, je vous conseille vraiment d'aller chercher le plus de partenaires possible, puis d'essayer d'implanter ça dans vos régions. C'est, je pense, la meilleure façon de faire présentement jusqu'à temps qu'on soit capable de développer vraiment des choses incroyables de réalité virtuelle, puis qu'on ait l'argent pour le faire.
Bon, merci Andrienne. We have time for just one more question. So apologies to the person who asked it. I'm going to try to just summarize it here. But this person had talked about how they have learning and visual issues, right? And they also had ADD, right? So this is an adult who was trying to learn French, right? But they were also had depth perceptions with reading material. They had ADD, and they say that their teacher was initially hesitant to even let them in the class, and they had trouble with that experience of learning French. And it sounds like they were also had a negative experience where the teacher, wasn't very understanding of their experience of learning a language. So I just wanted to see if both of you could just speak, both of you are teachers, you've worked in the classroom, but where is, the training, the sensitization for teachers around adults who have learning disabilities? I know there's progress there, in, K to 12 or, students, but when we're talking about adults, what are some of the complexities there or the nuances?
Ben, je vais débuter. La première chose qui est importante à savoir, c'est, je suis désolée pour la personne qui a eu de la difficulté à apprendre le français par des expériences désastreuses. Je crois que le gouvernement devrait en faire peut-être un petit peu plus justement pour l'accessibilité. L'accessibilité aux études qui est des personnes adultes, confond tout. Toutes personnes adultes confondues, mais plus particulièrement à ceux qui ont un handicap. Dans ce cas-ci, il y a des mesures adaptatives. Habituellement, dans une école primaire, secondaire, même au collège maintenant, il y a des mesures adaptatives et ces mesures adaptatives devraient fonctionner aussi chez les adultes et non pas juste les cantonner seulement aux personnes, aux adolescents ou aux enfants. Maintenant, c'est toujours un petit peu difficile d'avouer qu'on a des troubles d'attention ou qu'on a une difficulté. C'est la première chose que l'apprenant doit arriver puis dire, c'est « j'ai ces difficultés-là, comment vous pouvez faire pour m'aider? » Puis habituellement, l'institution, l'organisme communautaire, tout ça est dans l'obligation, selon certaines règles au Québec, de vous aider dans l'acquisition d'une langue ou même à aller aux études et à retourner aux études. Maintenant, je vous dirais que c'est vraiment, on a un gros travail à faire au Québec, en ce qui concerne justement l'adaptation dans les salles de classe. Il ne faut pas oublier que les salles de classe, en français langue seconde, vont varier de 20 à 25. Quand on arrive au collège, c'est 35. Quand on arrive à l'école secondaire, c'est 35 aussi. Donc, si on diminuait un peu pour laisser respirer un petit peu les professeurs, parce que quand on arrive dans une classe où il y a 5, 6 étudiants qui ont des besoins plus particuliers, il faut prendre le temps. Puis prendre le temps demande d'avoir justement un espace où l'étudiant et le professeur peuvent avoir une discussion. C'est aussi de les former. Je crois qu'on manque beaucoup de formation continue en ce qui a trait justement à l'accessibilité des personnes qui sont soit non-voyantes ou qui ont des difficultés pour entendre. Et c'est aussi de mettre à disposition justement des mesures informatiques technologiques parce qu'il y en a pour les personnes qui ont des difficultés à entendre ou à lire. Donc, moi, je crois beaucoup en la formation continue des professeurs, puis de courtes formations continues. Arrêtons de faire des formations de 45, 50, 60 heures. Faisons des formations intéressantes, mais qui vont aller droit au but pour aider justement les personnes qui sont en situation de handicap.
Merci, Andréane. Tino, did you have a quick response to that?
Yeah, I do, and I'll keep it quick. First and foremost, I agree with everything that Andréane said, and that is that special needs are as important in adult education as they are in the youth sector. The model to manage special needs exists. It's called the least restrictive model. It's also known as the cascade model, and it is applied in the youth sector. For this model to work in the adult education sector, of course, resources are needed, but more attention needs to be paid to andragogy. I'm sorry, I was thinking in French. Andragogy instead of pedagogy only. That is the pre-service professional development of teachers in the faculties of education, as well as the in-service professional development. The way adults learn is very different than the way children learn. And in order for any model, and of course, I'm making specific reference to the least restrictive model, in order for this model to work, it needs to be framed in the context of adult learners instead of the youth sector.
Thank you, Tino. So unfortunately, we do have to bring our webinar to a close. I want to thank you both for being with us today. It's been great to hear your perspectives. You're both excellent experts in your field, so we appreciate your time. Just a reminder to everyone, our report will be dropping next week, so please read it. Please let us know what you think. We also have another event next week on June 19th. There's a second part to this series. We're going to be looking at adult language learning in the national and international context. So we have a report coming out that looks at how other jurisdictions approach adult language learning. So we hope to see you there. We'll post a registration link for that event in the chat box. And yes, once again, thank you to our guests, and thank you everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.